It is that time of the month to kind of go over all the books that I read in September, and it was a wild month. I can't believe how many books I read and how many arcs I actually got to go through. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today, like I said in the intro, we are going to be going over all the books that I read in September. I got through so many arcs. I couldn't believe how many arcs I was able to get through. However, my physical TBR really suffered for that, and I'm hoping that I will be caught up after I read the current book that I'm reading to be able to read my physical TBR. I am never doing that again. However, I'm sure history will repeat itself at some point. But before we get into the books, please make sure that you always like and subscribe and check my description box below for all of my links to my socials, Pango Books account, which I have quite a few books on there still, and also my Bookish Box ambassador link where you get 10% off the entire store. So let's get into my September wrap up. The first book I'm going to talk about is Bleeding Rose by Kyla Shinder. I did talk about this book in length in one of my previous videos where I wrap up a lot of the arcs that I had recently read. I suggest for you to pick up. So I'm not really going to go into an in-depth overview on that book because you can go back and listen to it there. However, I gave this book 4 stars. It is so good. It's a fantasy or maybe a paranormal romance. I don't know how to classify it. I want to say it's fantasy. So we're just going to go with fantasy romance or romantasy, shall we? This book, very unique. I have never read from this author before, so I don't know if this is their debut book. I'm not quite sure, but you're following our main girl. She wants to be a guidance counselor, had just graduated college, got an interview at a school in upstate New York. She goes, she interviews for the job, she gets the job, signs a contract with it, and then all of a sudden she is whisked away to a whole different dimension that has primordial beings in there and gods. It deals with shifters, dragon shifters, and specifically it deals with a lot of different mythological creatures, shall we say, and nobody at this school wants her there because she's a human, so she's fighting for her life. It's a true enemies to lovers, extreme slow burn. I thoroughly enjoyed this book because it follows really closely to where you would think in real life this is how things would probably progress, how a relationship would progress, how you would fall for someone, how you would fight for someone you care about. And the shocking factor at the end of the book had me. I needed book 2 immediately. I have no idea when it's coming out. The banter with our 2 love interests, just top tier, honestly. Like, we go from him absolutely hating her to him worshiping the ground she walks on. What a redemption arc our man has. Let me tell you, there is groveling, there is spicy scenes, there is a lot of things that people would love in here, so definitely go pick it up if you want a very unique fantasy romance. The next book is Oath of Betrayal by Olena Nikitin. This book I unfortunately gave 2 stars to, but I do recommend it to a lot of people because at no fault for the author, but I was coming off my high from reading Bleeding Rose and it was so good that I couldn't get into the story. Maybe it was a little bit of the author's writing, their world building, their plot setup, but also it was a fault of mine as well. So I can't entirely fault the book or the author. However, this book is dealing with a polyamorous or a why choose romance. It is a fantasy romance. Our main girl has magic. Something happens at the beginning of the story. She goes into hiding. She doesn't want to be found. And then on Maiden Day, where people from the castle or the fortress, wherever that is closest, the men get to go out into the towns and the villages, and any single maiden they can have come back with them to there for a year, and really the women don't have a choice. So I didn't really like that factor, but the way that our female main character gets found out, put into this fortress, the love interest or the love interest's multiple happens. I can see where the story's going. I can see why people are going to love this story. It deals with a border to another neighboring kingdom that has all of these like terrible creatures and monsters and stuff. So they're trying to keep everybody safe. But year after year, the wards are kind of falling down. The creatures are getting through. So we're trying to uncover that mystery. So it's actually pretty good. I think there are a lot of people that would truly enjoy this book. Just sadly, it didn't hit for me. And the next one is The White Wolf's Wrath by Shea Halsey, I think is how you pronounce it. This book I gave 4 stars to as well. It is so good. It's a fantasy romance and it deals with a lot of Celtic mythology. It's so steeped in Celtic lore and Celtic mythology that I was just eating it up. I was like, I love this. I love this mythology setup. Love that the world and the characters are based all around that. You're following our main girl who was raised in this village. She is kind of nobility, shall we say. She is arranged to marry another noble-born boy. They grew up together, so they were friends, so she doesn't mind this. Of course, it's not going to be a love match, but it is going to be one where they can cohesively live together without any, problems in the marriage, and they already know each other, so she didn't see that there was a problem with that. However, her town ends up getting ransacked by this army. Her parents are killed and a lot of villagers. So she ends up hiding away, cutting her hair, acting like she's a servant, working in the kitchen. The story kind of goes from there. You learn who the White Wolf is. You learn why the army was there, why the townsfolk, ultimately fell to them, why they were looking for her specifically, what is her role in this army and this overarching plot. I loved this. It kept me invested from the very beginning. I do think that the way that this book ended and like the crumbs sprinkled throughout, that it is going to be a why choose romance. There's no way that it can't be. I don't see how the author cannot do a why choose romance now. But we'll have to see for book 2. If you like your fantasy romance really steeped in lore and mythology, definitely pick this book up. The writing style, not 100% the greatest. I can definitely tell that this is a newer author, maybe a debut author, not sure. Maybe it's an author that's writing in a genre that they've never written in before. It kept me invested. It kept me intrigued. I really fell for the characters. I fell for our girl. I fell for all of the love interests that could possibly be. So definitely go check this one out. And then the next one that I read was Seasons of Flesh and Flame by A.G. Howard. This is book 2 in a duology. The first book is Shades of Rust and Ruin that came out 2 years ago. This book just recently came out. I had an arc of it. It finishes up that duology and continues the story from there. This duology is absolutely perfect for this time of year. It's atmospheric. It will give you all of the Halloween, fall, spooky vibes, and you won't be creeped out by it. So I think I even recommended this series in my recommendations video that I posted, so you can go check that one out also. But I can't tell you what this book's about, but let's talk about the first book because it'll give you an idea of what the duology is about. Our female main girl, this is a YA fantasy horror, I think is how it is done, but it's not really horror, to me at least. I think scary, I think Stephen King horror. It's not like that, but it definitely has those gothic horror elements to it. But our girl is basically living in a family that a family member dies every Halloween. So she is trying to stay up. She's trying to prevent another family member from dying on Halloween. Whenever the inevitable happens, she is kind of confronted with this mystery and she's trying to solve it. There is a little bit of a romance in here, but it isn't like the forefront of the story. And you're kind of trying to figure out what is going on, how her family and why her family is involved with this disappearance. You end up going to like another realm. It's so good. It's very gothic-y and very atmospheric. And if you like your YA fantasies and you like the gothic horror elements without being like absolutely terrified, this duology is perfect. The second book's already out. It came out the middle of September, I think. So it's all ready for you to devour. So the first book is Shades of Rust and Ruin, and then the second book is Seasons of Flesh and Flame. The next book I picked up was Lady of Ashes by Melissa K. Rorick, which is, I believe, book 3 in the Lady of Darkness series, which consists of 5 books. I read the first 3 books, like 2 of them in August, 1 of them in September. I'm obsessed with this story. I'm obsessed with this world. I don't know what Melissa K. Rorick puts in her writing, but it's infectious. It just drags you in. We are continuing from where we picked up from book 2. This is a dark fantasy romance. It has a lot of dark elements and themes to it, but it's about our girl who was raised as one of these 3 death maidens, you know, people that lurk in the shadows. And the story kind of goes from there. I can't really give you a whole lot, but there is kind of a mystery that we're following. A mysterious general that shows up. Who is he? Why do we like him? I don't know. You'll have to read to find out. This story is really good. It deals with the Fae. It deals, like I said, with some very hard-hitting topics. So check trigger warnings before going in. But I mean, it's good. The atmosphere, the world, the way that you have a found family aspect, the way that you have the humans and the Fae where they know of each other, but they kind of stay to their own. You have vampires in here. You have wolf shifters. I'm sure we're going to come across a couple more creatures as we go. But there's like this overarching plot, a huge mystery. We're searching for some things that kind of correlate to our female main character's past and her mother and like who exactly she is. It's wonderful, you guys. So good. I feel like Melissa K. Rorick really deals with like trauma and trying to grieve and get through trauma very, very well. It's very well executed, is what I'm trying to say. But I highly suggest picking up the Lady of Darkness series. I know that it's floating around everywhere. People have been eating it up for the past year. I do think it just got picked up to be traditionally published, which is wonderful for our author because, you know, I can't wait to get to her spin-off series. I think it's called the Legacy series. Now, having finished book 3, I think I know what that spin-off series is going to be about, but I have 2 more books to read before I can get to it, so I'm hoping I can get to it soon. I then picked up Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter. The reason why is because I do have an arc of nothing better than the movies, not better than the movies. I can't remember what the sequel is called. Nothing like the movies. Anyway, I have that arc, but I needed to read the first book first because I didn't realize that these were like a series and they weren't standalones. So I ended up reading this one, gave it 5 stars. This is my second book by Lynn Painter that I have read that is a YA contemporary romance. I don't know what Lynn Painter does with her YA books. I'm invested. I loved it. I was giggling. I couldn't stop reading this book. And I don't really read a whole lot of YA anymore. But I was just like, I can't stop. I can't stop flipping the page. I don't want to go to bed. I need to stay up late into the night to read this. Absolute 5 stars. You know, you have our female main girl and our male main character that live next door to each other. And they're in driving age. I think they're juniors or seniors in high school. They've known each other their whole lives. They were friends growing up, and then high school happened, and they ended up having different friends kind of thing. And he keeps taking this spot on the road where she would park, which I think is like in front of her house. So she gets angry about it. A guy from their past who they used to be friends with when they were kids came back to school, and he, of course, is this mega hottie. She wants to be with him kind of thing. So she ropes her neighbor into going along with this to make her look more desirable. And she says, if you help me win him, you can have my spot. We all know what happens, right? We all know what happens in these scenarios, but I ate it up. The banter, the comedic relief. I loved so much about this, and I can't wait to get to the next book because I have heard that not only does it continue their story, but they're in college, so they're aged up a little bit more, and I'm intrigued to see how Lynn Painter's going to really portray them or where the story is going to go. So I can't wait to get to that book, but 5 stars. I need to read everything YA by Lynn Painter. I then read Wished by Sarah Reddy. I gave this book 3 stars. 3 stars is not terrible. It's kind of like it was okay. It wasn't terrible. I had a good time, but nothing remarkable happened type of thing. This book is a rom-com. It is hilarious. I really was invested with this story just for the good vibes and the fun times, but nothing memorable was happening, or like nothing that hasn't been done wasn't happening. However, this is like the 4th book in a series, but I think they are standalones. You don't have to read 3 to get to this one. You are following our female main character, who is a maid. She's been a maid for a few years to this like really rich billionaire guy in his mansion. She thinks that she knows him. She fell in love with him at first sight, right? Like several years ago. He has no idea who she is, obviously. And she thinks she knows him because she's like, I clean your house. I see what groceries you have. I see pictures. I see what you have here. And so she ends up going to clean his room, I think, and on his like dresser, jewelry area, there was a necklace and there was a note that says make a wish. So she's just like, you know what, whatever, let's make this wish. And she wishes that she was married to this guy. They wake up the next day. They know their past lives. They know that the previous day, they didn't have this relationship. He had no idea who she was. And it's about their romance. How are they going to undo this wish? And of course, we know they fall in love together. But you guys, this was really, really good. All of my rom-com girlies out there, run to go get this book. It is good. It's beautiful. I loved the banter. I loved the storyline. I loved how the resolution happened. The 3rd act breakup really wasn't terrible. So definitely go pick this up. All right, you guys, the next one I read was Rebel Witch by Kristen Cicerelli. This is the book 2 and the final book in that Crimson Moth duology. I was so fortunate to get a ARC copy of this. I don't know how. Don't ask me. I think that the book gods were looking down on me. I'm not sure, but I'm loving it nonetheless. This book, of course, picks up where our first book leaves off. I think there are a few months in between, but like it kind of tells you what happens in those few months very early on. But Gideon is not happy. You guys, do you remember at the end of book 1? He was like, I've been betrayed, my heart ripped out of me. Oh my goodness. But anyway, I can't really tell you much about the second book, but I can tell you, if you loved the first book, or if you kind of liked it but felt like there needed to be a little bit more of something, book 2 is going to throw it out of the park for you. It's beautiful. It's amazing. It's a 5-star read. I can't wait to read the series again, because even though I read an arc, this doesn't come out until February. I'm probably going to read Heartless Hunter and then Rebel Witch again, because fabulous, beautiful, such a good time. Can't get enough of it. At the end of the book, I sat there and I was like, how do I read anything after this? Like, how can I get anything better than this, or even comparable? It's good. Like, if you guys are on your seat waiting, this should give you an idea that it is worth the wait. I then read Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This is a cozy fantasy. And again, this is like the second cozy fantasy that I've read this year, and I'm just not a cozy fantasy girly. I need to stop trying. I'm never going to fit into that circle, and I need to just be okay with that. And sadly, that means that I'm going to miss out on some amazing stories, but it's not fair for the author and not fair for me to read something that I'm obviously not going to enjoy. But this book is about an orc. She was in battle. She's, been in wars and such, and she wants out of that life. She wants to go to a small, cozy little village, open a coffee shop, and just kind of live her life. And that is what she does. But the village that she decides to open a coffee shop in, they don't even know what coffee is. So now she's trying to explain it to everybody. People are kind of on the fence, like, what is happening? And she ends up hiring some people. There's a cast of characters and stuff. There's a little bit of a sapphic romance in here. But there's really no high stake. It's kind of like day to day on how she's getting the coffee shop ready, and then how she's trying to convince others to drink her coffee drinks. And then there's really not a whole lot that needs to be resolved in here. It is a quick read. Unfortunately, I gave it 2 stars because I'm just not a cozy fantasy girly. I'm happy that I read it because now I know why so many people love this story. But I just need to give cozy fantasy, just let it go. Do you remember whenever I was talking about Rebel Witch on how I was going to read anything that was going to be comparably close to the feelings I got? Well, I did get that. I ended up reading an arc of The House at Watch Hill by Karen Marie Moning, which is coming out October 1st. Oh my goodness, 5 stars. 5 beautiful, glorious stars. Granted, I was already a Karen Marie Moning fan. I have literally read every book that she has ever published. I love her writing. I love her stories. But this book is entirely different than what she has came out with. I absolutely love it. I need book 2 now. I need to know what happens. But let me give you a little bit of a summary. Our girl starts out the story, she's with her mom. Her mom is, of course, dying of cancer, which is very sad and tragic. She works multiple jobs trying to keep them afloat. They are so far in debt that, she's never going to get out of it. And she doesn't do relationships or anything because she just doesn't have time. Her mom's her best friend. She's had such a beautiful life with her mother. And one day, while she's at an interview, her house ends up burning down, her mom with it, and it's so tragic for her to go through. But now she doesn't know how to navigate life without worrying about her mother and focusing on herself. Then she gets a mysterious letter letting her know that she has inherited this vast fortune and this estate in Divinity, Louisiana. And she's like, this has to be a joke, right? So she goes down there because they pay for it all. She gets to Divinity. People in the town seem very nice, but the lawyer is like, oh, that house that's on Watch Hill, that huge Gothic mansion, is yours. And if you stay here for 3 years, you're going to have $160 million on top of owning that house. She thinks this is a joke. She's like, there's no way that I'm related to this lady who passed. And all of this stuff happens. She moves into the house. She decides to give this a good try. Be there for 3 years. And weird things are happening to her. She doesn't understand why the house feels the way that it does, why it's ominous. She doesn't understand why there's several people in the town that don't want her there. She thinks that she is imagining things that are happening. It's so good. Gothic vibes, perfect for this time of year. But this story is unique and wonderful and everything that you need. Honestly, I highly suggest if you want Gothic, if you want atmospheric, if you want like a mystery, but you want some spicy slow burn, check this book out. So good. 5 stars. The next book that I read was When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker. And I'm so sad to say this, but I gave it 2 stars. It is not a romantasy for me. I really don't even feel like the first book is a romantasy at all. I feel like people need to stop hyping it up like it's a romance because at least 70% of the book is really a fantasy. Like a high fantasy or an epic fantasy. It's not a romantasy. And if you go in thinking it's going to be a romantasy, you're going to be highly disappointed. But there is romance, of course, later on in the book. But by that time, I really wasn't invested. For at least 40% of the book, I had no idea what was going on. You were reading a chapter and then you get an excerpt from a journal from some girl and she's talking about moon plumes and stuff, and you're like, what are moon plumes? I mean, it wasn't very well developed. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't feel like the world building was good in the beginning. I don't feel like the story gripped me. Felt like we were all over the place. You're throwing in these excerpts that I have no idea why or what even reason it needs to be. I mean, there just wasn't a whole lot of explanation. And then by the time you get to, like I said, 60 to 70% of the book where things are starting to click, you're starting to understand like what moon plumes are, which let me let you know, they're dragons. We know there's dragons in here. Very unique style of dragons. By the time you get to that point where everything is clicking, you're understanding the world, you're understanding what the romance is going to be and, what our girl is going through. I was just out of it. I was like, I'm done. I don't even care at this point. I was so done with this book. I sold, or at least I had on my Pango Books account, all of my copies of When the Moon Hatched. My Fairy Loot, my Waterstones, I think my indie paperback is on there. I think I have another one coming and I'm going to be selling it. I mean, I'm done. Like, I don't even care. And I understand why people love it. I really do. But stop thinking that everything that has romance and fantasy needs to be a romantasy. Because romantasy is where 90% of the book is romance and only 10% fantasy. If you have like 60 to 70% fantasy and then there's a romance in there, that's a fantasy romance. Then I'm going to go in knowing that at first it's a fantasy and then we have romance in there. Anyway, I digress. 2 stars. I'm so sad about it. The next book that I read was Mortal Memories by F.A. Eden. This book is coming out in October. Highly suggest picking it up. I gave it 4 stars. I absolutely loved it. Is the writing great? Probably not. You might not think so, but if you go in knowing that the writing isn't fully fleshed out, that of course it's going to be a little bumpy along the way, then you're going to have a good time. This is following our girl where straight off the bat, we are running from the guards in the quarter, and I'm like, what is the quarter and why are there guards? And she ends up being hit, I think, to the ground or something where they're trying to arrest her, and then this guy intervenes and he basically is like, she's gonna be my wife by dawn. And you're like, what is happening? Come to find out, this guy is a fae and apparently he's nobility, so he saves her. She has no memory of who she is, what she was, why was she there. She literally knows nothing up to that point. So he takes her into his home. He gives her an option. He said, you can run, but they're going to find you and you'll probably be dead, or you can marry me. I'll keep you safe. You have to stay here for a year and then you can go back to the human world as long as once a month you come back to the quarter for, one night, and then you can go back to what you were doing. So they kind of have this agreement. She's like, okay, there's no, he's like, I don't even expect any, marital things to happen. It's just to keep you safe. So he's a fae, she's a human. They get married. Our girl's trying to find out who she is and all this stuff. She ends up going out walking with him, seeing a guy. Come to find out, she is a lady of the night, shall we say. But in this world, that's not a bad thing. So definitely trigger warnings going in that it is romanticized, idealized in here. So just know going in that there is that, and it's heavy throughout the book. But anyway, she finds that out, and then as she's starting to remember her clients and they're coming into her life, she's starting to piece some things together, and then the husband and wife are starting to get close. They're bantering back and forth. They're doing a project in the home together. The story goes from there. It is so good. I absolutely loved this story. Like I said, if you go in just wanting a good vibey time, go in knowing that. So good. I really can't wait until the second book because I want to know how everything's going to get resolved after what I just read at the end of this book. I then read an arc of A Betrayal of Storms by Ben Alderson, and I will tell you right now, I gave it 2 stars. I was excited for this. It's fantasy, it's queer, it had a lot of vibes going for it. The writing was really not good. I can read a lot of books that doesn't have really well writing styles, and I can get through it pretty easily, but this one, no. I struggled so hard to read this book. I don't even know how I got through it. I think I was skimming by the end of it. I couldn't even tell you half of what happened because it wasn't good. The romance, not good, not fleshed out. Let's just go on to the next book because I really don't want to focus on a lot of negativity on this book. Go in at your own risk. The next one I read was Fighting Destiny by Amelia Hutchins. I gave this book 3 stars. I'm on the fence. Am I going to continue this series? Am I not going to continue this series? In parts of me, I enjoyed this book. Part of me did not enjoy this book. I think that what really lost me was it's really like insta-lovey from one person's perspective. She's forced into this. She is forced to get in bed with this guy. She's forced into a lot of things, and that just didn't set well with me. But then why at the end of the book was I wanting to read the second one? I don't know. Our girl, this was a whole hot mess. I'm going to be honest with you. Our girl is a witch, I think, is how she's classified. And she has power and all of this stuff. She ends up getting entangled with the Fae. And then she ends up having to be bound to this prince, dark prince, I think. All of a sudden, now she's being forced to be around him all the time whenever Fae actually can kill you by basically making you just have sex a lot. They kill you that way. And, our girl's like, don't touch me. I don't want you to kill me. I don't want you to suck my soul out and all this stuff. We're going through a mystery. Like, what is happening? What is going on? Why does she need to be bound to this Fae prince? I had a lot of questions. I really didn't feel the romance with the 2 leads, but maybe it continues. I'm not sure. I have a lot of mixed emotions. That's why I gave it a 3 star. I was like, I really like kind of the story and the mystery and what's happening, but I also don't understand why she had to be forced and why it couldn't just be something that gradually happened naturally. So I don't know if that comes into play in the second book, but 3 stars. It wasn't terrible. I then read The Co-op by Tara DeWitt. I have realized this is my 3rd book by Tara DeWitt, and I don't think she's an author for me. She writes amazing books. I know a lot of people love her small town, really cozy romances. I guess I'm just not really vibing with the story and her writing style, honestly, but it's not that it's terrible because it's great. It's actually excellent writing, excellent, world, excellent cast of characters. It just, I don't know, connected to the characters, connected to the world. There was a whole lot going on that it was sweet. It was wholesome. There's a little bit of spice. There's all of these things, but just putting them all together in the story didn't set with me, and I ended up giving it 3 stars. Like I said, it's in the middle. It was okay, but it wasn't great. But with this being the 3rd book that I wasn't overly ecstatic about after reading, I think I'm going to put the author down. So let's talk about a book that is going to be the perfect October read. Okay, and it's coming out in October. I think it got bumped up. I'm not sure. If not, it's coming out in November. But that is If I Stopped Haunting You by Colby Wilkins. You guys, this book, I requested the arc strictly just from the cover, but this arc is so good. You are following 2 indigenous native authors, and you start off at BookCon where they're on a panel, and our male main character, he is fully native, fully indigenous, and she always talks about herself as being half, so she's not good enough, she thinks, in the indigenous and native community, where that's not true. It's just the way that she views herself. And she had written a book that really didn't do well. It was okay, but it wasn't like overtly good. But our male main character, he's written a book, and I guess the way that our female main character says is he like whitewashed it. He basically made it like not what it was supposed to be. So she calls him out about it at BookCon on the panel. He starts saying something or whatever, and she ends up walking away, and she throws a book at him and hits him in the face. And then that's the prologue, right? Speed up a couple months. She hasn't written a single thing. She can't get over whatever writing block that she has going on. So her friend Laszlo tells her, hey, we're going to go on a writer's retreat. We're going to go to Scotland. We're going to stay in this haunted castle in Edinburgh. And she was like, okay, fine. Let's go. Come to find out, whenever they get there, she has another girl there that she has a past with, like a one-time night stand thing. And then also, here comes Neil Storm, our male main character, and she's like, I am not staying in this castle for a week with Neil. She ends up doing it. In this castle, it's haunted. There are ghosts. There's a mystery. Of course, there's tension between them. You have dual POV in this book, so you understand what Neil's thinking, what she's thinking, and they're both thinking the same thing. They both are attracted to each other. They both like each other. They both like each other's works and everything. So, of course, we know where it's going, but it's so much more than just the romance. It's also the fact that they are solving this mystery. They're being ghost hunters. They're trying to see what's going on. I gave this book 4 stars. Pick it up immediately. It is so good. And then the next book was an arc, and it is The Serpent and the Wolf by Rebecca Robinson. 4 stars, you guys. This is a fantasy romance. Go pick it up. So good. From the first chapter, I was hooked. The writing is good. The world building is amazing. Story is great. This is a forced arranged marriage. This is about warring kingdoms. She ends up going into this marriage, basically ties him to the bed and like runs away. Then we fast forward, I think 3 months. She's in like a whole different kingdom trying to study because she has this curse inside her. She's like, I need to know what's going on with this. And the story goes from there. He tracks her down. She thinks he's this like brutal, cruel guy. That's what she's been told her whole life. And he gives her kind of a, I guess, option where he says, if you stay with me for 3 years and you help me win this election where I'm going to be headman of Ikruria, and that's basically like king of the whole place. And if you help me win that and you stay with me for 3 years, then I will grant you the divorce. You can go wherever you want. I will fund it. And she says, okay, I'll do that. And so it starts out as a game. We all know how that goes, right? It starts out as a game. It's not real. But then reality and the game start blurring lines, and the story goes from there. It is so good. The amount of plot twists towards the end of the book had me with my jaw on the floor. I couldn't understand what was happening. I mean, I was just reeling. I need book 2. And this book hasn't even came out yet. This book comes out November 19th. I highly suggest picking it up. Don't wait. If you want a great fantasy romance that has such good banter, such good world building, a mystery, and all of the good things that you like, pick this book up. The last book that I did finish in September is The Stars Are Dying by Chloe C. Penaranda. I did not think that I was going to like this book because I had an audio arc of it from NetGalley. Starting out, I was like, what is happening? What is going on? Like, it took me a couple chapters to get into it. But then, once I fully grasped what was going on, I flew through this. It was so good. I'm so happy that I pre-ordered the really beautiful deluxe edition that has the stars and the dark edges and stuff on it. However, I can't wait for the second book. I don't know when it's coming out. I haven't looked. I know that I have the deluxe edition also pre-ordered because our girl is raised not really as an assassin or anything, but she's raised by like some not so savory people on the outskirts of this town. She ends up being best friends with a nobleman's daughter, and she's not really supposed to mix with them, but she knows who she is. The noble daughter knows who our main girl is, but I tell you what, it is so good. The nobleman's daughter says, hey, can I ask you to come with me? I gotta be in the trial for it's kind of like district. It's like a Hunger Game-esque type thing, but not really Hunger Games. But each area has to have someone go to this trial, and If you don't have somebody that goes there, then you basically have to lock up your town for a whole year because the vampires, the soulless vampires, are going to like invade you. But if you go and you abide by the rules, then you are safe and have immunity for a year. So she ends up escorting her because that's her best friend. Things happen along the way. Anyway, Estrella, our main girl, ends up having to compete in these trials for her best friend. Story goes from there, and we're unraveling what these trials are, like how she has to get all of these keys. She has a guy in her head named Knight. She doesn't know who he is, but he's been keeping her safe. He can like take form in front of her and stuff. By the time she gets to where the trial is, she finds out who Knight is, where he is, what he's about, and you kind of uncover more of the mystery as you're going. I loved it. I loved everything about this book. Once I had a grasp, I think it takes a good few chapters to really get you to that point. But I will tell you, I flew through it. I loved it. 4 stars. Highly recommend this book whenever it comes out. I think it's October 8th is when it comes out. So definitely go check that out. I am filming this a few days early because I have some plans on the weekend. So I only have one more book on the go. So I don't know if I'm going to end up finishing that. So if I end up doing that, I'll end up just putting it in my October wrap up anyway. But I hope you all enjoyed this video. Are any of these books that you are going to pick up, or have you picked them up? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you don't have anything to say, put a little ghost emoji down below, because we are going into October, spooky season with all the fall vibes. And I will see you all next time. Bye!